Hey everyone, it's Pam, and today I'm here with another collection video going over all my games for the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 2 was first released in the year 2000. It came out a few months earlier in Japan and then came out in North America in September of 2000, I believe. It is the best-selling console of all time. I'm pretty sure it still holds that record to this day, selling somewhere around 150 or 160 million units over its lifetime. It's a great console. As soon as it came out, it was backward compatible, so you could play all your PS1 games on it. It improved on the DualShock controller with the DualShock 2 that was just a great controller to have, and it has an immense library with genres that are all over the place. There's something for everyone on the system. I had a lot of JRPGs that I really liked on PS2, but there were a ton of other genres to choose from as well. And though it came out in the year 2000, I didn't get it until a few years later. I was usually a couple years behind on all my consoles up until the most recent generation. So I got my PS2 for Christmas in 2003, and I remember it happening because in the morning I sat down to open Christmas presents with my mom and my stepdad. It was just the three of us, and my stepdad didn't always think things through, so I went to open presents and he said, here, open mine first. And I open it up and it's a PS2 game. So I was like, oh, I guess this means I got a new PlayStation? Like, kind of ruined that surprise, but yes, I did also get the PlayStation, so I had something to play it on, and it quickly became one of my favorite consoles. So today I'm just going to go over my collection and all of the games that I have for it. Going alphabetically, as usual, the first game is Ark the Lad Twilight of the Spirits. This is still wrapped, so it's obviously not my original copy, but just one I wanted to have in the collection because it is a game that I played. Honestly, this is not memorable at all. I know that I played this game. If you were to ask me what the story was about, what the combat was like, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So that's probably not a super good sign for the quality of this game. But yes, one of the JRPGs I played that just didn't really stick with me in any way. The next one is the Bards Tale, and this is sort of an action RPG. It's based on the Bards Tale series, which is an older series of CRPGs. They also recently made a Bards Tale 4 after a successful crowdfunding campaign a couple years ago. This was my first experience with the series. It looked like a fun game, and also the protagonist, the Bard, is voiced by Cary Elwes, who I very much liked because of his appearances in The Princess Bride and Twister. Overall, gameplay-wise, it was alright, but story-wise and humor-wise were really the things that stood out to me. It's quite a funny game, lots of sarcastic little quips and silly things happening, like skeletons rising up and dancing, things like that. So it's been a while since I played this one, actually, but if you're looking for funny games, which I'm always looking for games that have a good sense of humor, this is a pretty good one. Next up is Beyond Good and Evil, which is one of my favorites. I have talked about this before a few times, I think, in one of my videos where I talk about photography in games, as well as in my Top 100 series. In this, you play a woman named Jade, who is a caretaker to a bunch of orphans, as well as a photojournalist, and it does a really good job of combining sort of combat, fighting these aliens that are taking over your home planet, with photographing things. So you can photograph the local wildlife in order to gain some money, in order to buy things and get upgrades and things, and also use your camera to get evidence of the conspiracies that are happening in your home world as you figure out what's happening in the story. Overall, just really good. There are some kind of annoying parts that I've noticed as I went back to play it fairly recently. The slaughterhouse level in particular, it's very, very easy to get lost there, but overall, this game has so much personality, the music is great, it's very colorful, and it has good artwork and stuff like that, and I just love the camera mechanic and how they implement it in the game. This is Britney's dance beat. Don't tell him I told you this, but this is Will's, not mine. I have played it once when we started dating, and he got me a PS2 as one of the first gifts he ever bought me, which was awesome. And he picked up Britney's dance beat so that we could play it together, and it's fun. I love Britney Spears, and it's a rhythm game where you dance along to the music. So it's surprisingly fun and surprisingly very, very playable. Next up is Dark Cloud. This is another RPG, and honestly, I picked this one up because it was one of the Cartridge Club Games of the Month, probably a year or two ago now, and I had every intention of playing it, and then I just never did, so I can't tell you anything about this. The next game is Disaster Report, and I love odd games, and I think this sort of qualifies as one. There's been a giant earthquake, and you have to get to safety as well as find other people who are sort of trapped and looking to get to safety and escort them. It's very interesting. You have to climb over train cars and on bridges, and they collapse as you run by them, and sometimes it means that you fall into the water and die, but sometimes it means you can successfully jump to safety. It does seem like there's a little bit of a memorization component to it. There was a few times as I played it where I would have had no idea that this floor was about to collapse and I was about to fall into the ocean, and you just kind of have to learn from it. But the good thing about it is that it has very fair and very common checkpoints, so you never have to go back too far in order to keep progressing. I haven't played through the whole thing, but it is quite fun. I noticed that I don't have the manual, which kind of makes me sad, but this is interesting, definitely a unique one in the library. Next up is Echo Night Beyond, and though this probably isn't the game you think of when someone mentions From Software, this is a From Software game. You and your loved one are going on a trip through space. You wake up, your wife or fiance, one of those, is gone, and the ship seems to be haunted, and you need to find out what is happening. It's sort of like a survival horror game, like first-person survival horror. Honestly, I'm probably not going to put much more time into this. I did give it a shot, but it's, I don't know, it was very sort of clunky to move around. It was a little bit slow, so this might go up on the trading block at some point. Next up is Escape from Monkey Island. I am a big fan of The Secret of Monkey Island. Monkey Island 2 is good, but not quite as good for me, and that's pretty much the extent of the series that I played. So when I saw this one at a swap, I thought it would be a good way to get into more of the games. This one is more 3D, whereas the first couple are beautiful pixel art, so it is a bit of a change up in the format. Sadly, when I put this one in the system, it made a bunch of ugly noises and refused to play. So I will try to give it a resurface, but until then, this one's not going to get much attention, and honestly, I will probably play this on PC. The next game is ESPN NFL Football 2K4. I know that 2K5 seems to be the game that everyone thinks of when they think of this series, but this is the one that I had, and this actually is the first game that I got for PS2. It's the one that my stepdad gave me to open on Christmas before I had opened the actual console itself, and I played this game so much. I don't think I ever actually sat down and just played a single game, but I loved the franchise mode. Picking a team and putting together your roster and doing the draft between every season and looking at stats, that stuff all just thrills me, more the management part of the game than the actual game itself, though I did actually play every season game myself. I'm pretty sure there was a way you could just let the computer play if you wanted to, but the computer wouldn't have a perfect record like I would when playing it. So I love this game. Honestly, if stupid EA hadn't signed that exclusive deal with the NFL so that Madden is the only NFL game that can exist now, I might still play sports games because this is honestly better than any Madden game I've ever played, including the new ones. So I'm sad this is no longer a series. What else? Oh, the crib was like another part of my favorite thing. You'd get this little sort of man cave. That's a stupid term. And you could decorate it with all of your teams, like banners and trophies and little bobbleheads and things. And yeah, this is definitely one of my most played games on the PS2 because I went through a number of seasons in franchise mode. Next up is The Fast and the Furious. There's a subtitle here which appears to be in Japanese, but apparently Speed needs no translation. Honestly, this is Will's. I've never played this before. Next up, some survival horror. Fatal Frame 1, Fatal Frame 2, and Fatal Frame 3. These used to be quite valuable, and then someone went ahead and reprinted them, which is good. I'm glad that more people have access to them than they would otherwise, but it kind of tanked the value of these games. Fatal Frame 2 is the first of the series that I played. I remember when I was, I don't know, my early 20s, I used to work at a bookstore, Chapters, and one of my friends there, we would always like go to each other's houses to pass the controller back and forth as we played scary video games. We played this, we played Clock Tower. I remember I found some emails talking about Rule of Rose and Haunting Ground and how they still cost too much at EB, and so we never picked those up. Little did we know how much they would cost now. But Fatal Frame is excellent. I love that there's two characters in it, even though you get separated at times. It has a very creepy soundtrack. I mean, it's got that Japanese horror aesthetic with, you know, creepy little girls crawling out of wells and things. So it was very, very scary, but a lot of fun. Another game that uses photography as a main mechanic, which I'm always a pretty big fan of. Fatal Frame 1, I just started playing this a few months ago now. I got about 2/3 of the way in, and then I sort of got stuck. I had used up all my health items, and there was one fight that was just constantly kicking my ass, so I haven't gone back to this one in a little while. And then Fatal Frame 3, I actually have not played yet, but I'm going to guess that it's very similar to the first two. Next up, Final Fantasy X. This is one of the games that sold me on the PlayStation 2. I remember going over to a girlfriend's house and watching her play it and seeing how the in-game, in-engine footage looked as good as like the cutscenes from a PS1 Final Fantasy game, and just thinking like, wow, this is amazing. I need a PS2 and I need to get this game, which is funny because Final Fantasy VII is what made me get a PS1. I love this game. It's a lot more linear than previous ones in the series. Titus can be a little bit annoying, but I love Yuna. She's a great character, and really, it's more her story than his, and I love her self-sacrificing nature on the march towards sin. It's also got a beautiful soundtrack, and I really like the, I totally forget what it's called now, but the skill point map thing. I'm sure someone will tell me what it's called. Great game. I like the summons. It's just so beautiful. Probably the most beautiful Final Fantasy game. And then next is the most fun Final Fantasy game, which is Final Fantasy X2 or X-2. This continues Yuna's story. It was basically a direct sequel to 10, where Yuna, Riku, and newcomer Pain are going through Spira as mercenaries and sphere hunters, and it got a little bit of derision, as things that star and cater to girls tend to do. The game opens up with an amazing J-pop concert, which is a lot of fun, and that's the thing about this game. It's just so fun. You get so many different dress spheres. Every character can switch between classes on the fly. They all get different outfits for every class that they're playing, and it's very fast-paced, even though it's using that active time battle that most of the earlier games used. It's just, everything seems faster and more fluid, and it's full of mini games and little missions, and it's just great. I think it's, again, the most fun Final Fantasy game, even though the story can be a little silly. Next up is God of War, which was one of the more impressive action games of its time. I think I've talked about this one before in my top PS2 games video. It was probably also in my top 100. Yes, it was. This is a great game. I remember getting it, and it's very, very violent and bloody, which is kind of cool, honestly, or at least it was when I was, 20 years old. It's still, though, last time I put it on, I was impressed by how fluid the animations are. When Kratos has his, what are they called, Blades of Chaos, and he just whips them around, it's like a beautiful dance that he's doing, a beautiful violent dance. I just really liked it. It's very QTE focused. I know a lot of people hate QTEs. I am not one of the people that hates them. Just all the set pieces with the giant gods and monsters that you're fighting were all most impressive. Although this is the only God of War game that I've ever played. Next up, Grand Theft Auto. Vice City is actually the only Grand Theft Auto game I have ever completed. And then San Andreas, this one is Will's. I've actually never played this one, so I'm not going to talk about it much, other than to say I believe this is the best-selling PS2 game of all of them, of all 4,000 or whatever that came out. But Vice City is interesting. It's got that sort of Miami Vice 80s neon aesthetic. It's fine. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I went and did all the collectibles and things when I was playing through it in the early 2000s. Now that I have sort of tried others in the series and weren't impressed by them, and now that I've discovered Saints Row, which basically does everything GTA does better, I don't feel any particular affinity for the game or the series. Next up is Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. And this is a visual novel. I assume it's in the same vein as Ace Attorney, though honestly I've never played an Ace Attorney game. You play Harvey Birdman, who is a bad lawyer, and you go through a number of cases where you need to defend someone against a crime that they've been accused of. You get sort of different choices to make. You can present them with a piece of evidence and then push them on a statement they've made if it doesn't line up with the evidence or something they've said before. It's supposed to be funny. I've only played through one case, but most of the jokes seem to be men are stupid and women are whores. Haha. Next up is Indigo Prophecy, also called Fahrenheit. I think in Europe that's what it was called. This is a game by Quantic Dream, David Cage, so he also did Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human, and another one that I can't remember at this moment. This is the first one of his games that I played, and I remember when I first played it, it blew me away. It has one of the best game openings, or the most impactful game openings I've played. You sort of start out and you are in a diner bathroom, I think, and you're standing over a dead body, and the body is dead because you killed the person, and you have to figure out what to do. The police are coming, and do you run away? Do you try to hide? Do you distract someone or crawl through the vents? Or I'm not sure if these are the exact things you can do, but it was it just sort of started with a bang, and it was great. It's got the same kind of formula that his later games stew, not quite as polished, but also a little bit more interesting, I think, than his other games. Unfortunately, when you get to the back half or the back third of the game, the story kind of falls apart and it just brings up stuff out of nowhere and it doesn't really work in the end. But yeah, very, very effective opening, and it is Max Moo. Max is climbing on pillows that are still in plastic. Next up is Jurassic Park Operation Genesis. This is a theme park builder where you get to build Jurassic Park. So it's something that automatically stood out to me since I do tend to collect Jurassic Park games. I have done a video review of this if you want to check that out. Overall, this is really good. The visuals obviously are a little bit dated, especially when compared to the new game, Jurassic World Evolution, but I did find this one actually more fun than the new game. Some of the options you have, the different tourist attractions are really interesting, and of course, it's fun after you've built your park and gotten up to 5 stars to knock down all the fences and let the dinosaurs eat the tourists. Next up is Kingdom Hearts. I remember being very excited about this game when it first came out. Combining Final Fantasy characters with Disney characters seemed like such a cool idea. In execution, it didn't totally work for me. I didn't really like the action combat as opposed to the typical sort of JRPG turn-based combat. There were some levels, like the Little Mermaid one, where you had to listen to Under the Sea for like 10 hours, it felt like, that got kind of annoying. This is the only one in the series that I played. From what I know, the lore gets extremely convoluted after this. But yeah, this was a little bit disappointing to me, just not really what I'm looking for in my JRPGs. Next is another interesting one. It is Mark Echo's Getting Up, and this is all about rival gangs and tagging walls and doing graffiti and sort of battling it out for territory. It's a very interesting one. What it ends up being is a lot of sort of hand-to-hand combat and things like that, but it has a fantastic soundtrack and it's got quite an impressive voice cast for a PS2 game. It includes everything from Adam West, Brittany Murphy, Charlie Murphy, Giovanni Ribisi, Rosario Dawson, The RZA, Sean Diddy Combs, like a lot of good people and a lot of good music, like everything from Nina Simone to Mobb Deep. It's really good. The gameplay, I feel like, gets a little bit old after a time, but just like the production values in it and the music and the voices are all pretty impressive. Here's where everyone gets mad and tells me I should play these. I have the Metal Gear Solid Collection on PS2. It includes Metal Gear 1, 2, and 3. I've never played these. I've honestly feel like I have missed the Metal Gear zeitgeist. Even though I'm currently reading the boss fight books, is that what it's called? Boss fight books on Metal Gear Solid. I don't know. I feel like it's past its time. It's too late for me to get into the series, so for now it just sits here as a nice little box set where everyone tells me I should play it, but I just can't make myself put them in the system. Here's another oddity. It is Mr. Mosquito. In this game, you play a mosquito, and you are terrorizing pretty much a family in this one house. You need to feed on them. They find you very annoying. It's got a very funny opening where it's got like 5 minutes of voiceover that you can't skip through, talking about your precious mosquito life and how you're trying to make it through the winter by feeding on these people. It plays kind of like like almost like a Star Fox, like a 3D spaceship game. You have to go around and find the sort of sweet spots on people's bodies where you can bite them and suck their blood, but if they notice you, you'll get into like this little skirmish where they'll try to like slap you away or smash you, and you have to get away from them. It's very, very strange. The first level, if the daughter notices you and tries to squish you, you have to find the spot to calm her down, and you do that by biting her on her crotch, which is kind of weird, but yeah, it's a very odd, funny game where you're basically trying to destroy this family as they take out their frustrations about this mosquito in their house on each other. Next, Need for Speed Underground 1 and 2. Again, these are Will's. I haven't really played a racing game in many years. I think Gran Turismo was the first one and probably the last one that I really got into in any real capacity. Next up is The Operative, No One Lives Forever. I remember seeing this game in Electronics Boutique or any other sort of game stores at the time, all the time. It was the PC box that I would see, not the console one, but I always looked at it and was like, oh, it's like a female James Bond, like looks really groovy, and for some reason I just never picked up a copy for PC, so I got this on PS2. I've only played a little of it. It's very much like GoldenEye, except it handles a little better, honestly, but again, I don't know, it just seems like it would be much better on PC as opposed to console, but it's got all kinds of cutscenes, and it's got like this very sort of 60s vibe, and I really like the main character. Next up is Okami, and I played a couple hours of this probably sometime in my mid-20s, and I just remember it being quite a beautiful game. It's sort of like a third-person 3D, not really a platformer, but you run around and you do things as this wolf, and I actually put this in the system just yesterday to try to see what it was about, sort of like try to remember a little bit more about it, and the intro would just not end. It was just voiceover, and not even real voiceover, like the fake English voiceover, and words on a screen, and black and white pictures, and it went on forever, and you couldn't skip it, so I ended up saying, nope, I will not jog my memory. I wanted to play this. I actually got the remaster when it came out, but then I heard that it was 30 or more hours long, which I feel like is too long for this kind of game, but who knows? Maybe I will give it a shot on Xbox one of these days. Next up is Playboy, The Mansion, and this is a game that a company that I worked for, Groove, worked on. I did QA on it, although most of my QA wasn't focused on this. It was focused on the expansion, which is called Private Party, which received an M rating, so it's only on PC as it wasn't allowed to come out on consoles. I actually really liked this game. Of all the games that I did QA on, this was probably the most fun. I've never really been a big fan of The Sims, but I liked it in this because it was very directed. So you basically play as Hugh Hefner, and you have to run your magazine. So you have to hire authors to write articles for you, you have to hire models, you have to do the photo shoot, and then in the middle of it, you need to have parties so that you can sort of like be a mover and a shaker and get to know people and like get more authors and more models and more people sort of on your list that you can use in future issues of the magazine. And it was actually really well done. It was basically a more directed The Sims that also had boobs. Next up is Psychonauts, which sadly I have played very little of. This is one of those games that's been on my backlog for so long, and I keep telling myself, Pam, you really need to play this game. It's a Tim Schafer game by Double Fine, and I tend to really like their work, and they tend to be very funny. The little of it I played was really enjoyable. It had that cute, quirky sense of humor. It's sort of like a third-person 3D platformer kind of thing, but with a big focus on story. You sort of go into other people's brains and figure out what's wrong with them. And yes, I need to play it. I will. I promise. I'll play it soon. And next up is Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. One of Will's friends gave these to me, which was very nice of him. Silent Hill is a series I've always had a hard time getting into. If you remember my PS1 collection video, I talked about playing Silent Hill 1 and getting too scared and turning it off. And that's kind of how it went with the next games. I played a bit of Silent Hill 2, although I played the remastered one, which apparently is a bad decision because it's not very well made. But it just gets too scary for me. Like, the atmosphere is so creepy. I don't know what it is that makes me able to play Fatal Frame 2, but makes me want to turn off Silent Hill and never put it back in the system again. And next is my favorite series of JRPGs, Shadow Hearts Covenant, and Shadow Hearts from the New World. This is a fantastic series. The first one I actually played was Covenant. I remember seeing it in the store and being very attracted to this cover and wanting to play it. I didn't know a ton about it, but once I started playing, it was one of the most fun JRPGs I'd ever played. It's got this fantastic judgment ring for your combat, so it's not just a matter of click attack, the character does it, like you actually have to have some interaction, and based on how well you do, you can attack harder or even miss attacks. It's got this great way of getting new spells and abilities, and eventually it culminates in like this big puzzle where you have to put spells in certain places based on their descriptions. It's got amazing characters. You have one of your characters is a wolf, and their personal quest is like a series of dogfights that they need to do. There's another character who's a puppeteer who has this little girl puppet, and you get her stronger by getting new dresses made for her. And everyone just has like their own personal quest and their own personal way of like getting better weapons or better armor and things, and it's so much fun. It's got a story that sort of borrows from real life. It includes a bit of World War II, a bit of history of the Romanovs, but in a highly sort of fictionalized way. Honestly, just super good. And a lot of the enemies are very odd, like they're kind of grotesque and weird, so it's kind of got some horror elements in there as well. After I played Covenant, I got the first one because I wanted to see where the story started. This one is a little more serious than Covenant is. Covenant has a lot of humor in it. This one is a little bit darker, a little less humorous, but still has some very interesting characters and very sort of horrific monsters, and still has that judgment ring system for the combat. And then From the New World is sadly the worst of the series, but still pretty fun. You are in America in this one, sort of going to different cities. You can like interact with mobsters in Chicago, and honestly, I forget where else you go. It's got another odd cast of characters that you'll be playing as, and there's always like little ties that ties the trilogy together. But yeah, if you're looking for an excellent JRPG, Shadow Hearts Covenant, highly recommended. This is another unique one. It's Shadow of Destiny, and it's kind of like an adventure game, not a point-and-click adventure, but I'm not really sure what else to call it. At the beginning of the game, you get murdered, and you have to travel back in time in order to figure out who is murdering you, as well as prevent it. It all takes place in this little European town, and you really travel through time, like not just back a day or two, but like back hundreds of years in some cases. So you can see this town as it sort of grows and changes throughout time. You can visit different characters. It's an interesting one. It doesn't completely work. There was some things that were kind of a little bit frustrating for me, but overall, yeah, again, just quite unique. I was on a podcast, the RF Generation Playcast, where we talked all about this game. I will link that in the description if you want to know more. Next up is Shadow of the Colossus. This is another one I've talked about quite a bit, both in my PS2 favorites and in my top 100 games of all time. It's one of those games that was such a perfect experience the first time I played it, that I don't ever want to play it again. I thought I did. When they announced a remaster, I thought, oh, I want to play it again. And a couple times I've put it in the PlayStation and played for like 5 minutes, but every time I go, no, I'm just gonna have my memory of what this game is, and I don't want anything to sort of interfere with that, so I'm not going to play it again. But it's amazing. It's a beautiful game with a very sad and thoughtful story, and fighting these colossi is just very exhilarating at times, though also quite sad when you think about it. Next up is The Simpsons Hit and Run, which is very much like similar games like Crazy Taxi. You play as the Simpsons and you drive all through Springfield. You can run over pedestrians, you can get in car accidents. Every mission gives you a little thing to do, like go to the store and get ice cream or go pick up the kids from school. It's a fun game, although I have to admit that seeing the Simpsons 3D models kind of creeps me out. Queen, SingStar. I love Queen. I do not have a PS2 microphone. This is Space Channel 5, a game that I was always interested in, but until recently I didn't know that it was on PS2. I always considered it a Dreamcast game, and Dreamcast is not a system I've ever really been interested in playing. This is a rhythm game. You play this news reporter called Ooh La La, and you have to dance to the rhythm as you report on the news. And it's very cute. It's definitely got like a spacey 60s aesthetic, which is really fun, and the music is cute, and I've only played a little bit of it, but it's a good rhythm game. This is Star Ocean Till the End of Time. I love Star Ocean Second Story, along with Shadow Hearts Covenant. It's like up there in my top JRPGs of all time, even my top games of all time. That game had such personality to it, and both Till the End of Time and the other one, which was on 360, whose name I don't even remember now, are just totally bland and unmemorable. The characters kind of suck. I don't remember what the story is, other than the fact that there's like a simulation at some point. Yeah, this was a disappointing game, as all follow-ups to Second Story were. Like, look at these characters. Are these not the most bland character designs you've ever seen in your life? I hate them. Ugh. Star Wars Battlefront. This one is Will's, and honestly, if it's not KOTOR, I don't care. Actually, the end of the alphabet is a lot of Will's games. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Pro Skater 4. I hear they have excellent soundtracks, but I've never played them. We also have Transformers and Transformers the Game. Again, never played these. And finally, to cap it off, is the X-Files Resist or Serve. I wanted this one because I really liked the PS1 X-Files game a lot, and while that one is an FMV adventure game, this one is more in the vein of a Resident Evil. It's sort of like a third-person, fixed-angle, kind of spooky game where you're playing as Mulder and Scully and fighting aliens and things, and honestly, the looks aren't particularly good. Like, it's a little blocky, you know, not the best animation or things I've ever seen. So while I have tried this out, I don't know, it's just sort of disappointing after the PS1 version. And that's it. That is the PS2 collection. I hope you liked the video. Please comment. Let me know if there's any of your favorites in here, if there are any PS2 games that are missing from my collection you think I should give a look. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.